Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee. Joining, per usual, my benevolent co host, the future mayor of Ann Arbor, the future governor of Virginia, TK Eppley. Today we're going to be talking about what's the difference between being cocky, arrogant, confident, and your ego. It's kind of a continuation from our Wednesday episode. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
I tell you what, I need that hot coffee this morning, my friend, because getting here to the distillery, because we were talking about heating and stuff like that. Like, hey, when I leave, I turn the heat off. I'm like, there's nothing here. There's no reason for it to be on. So it was 48 degrees inside here. So I'm still bundled up.
You're doing jumping jacks to keep warm while you're starting everything up?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't really like iced coffee. I said, so I'll get the coffee at the last second, so it'll still be hot.
So in the intro, you were talking about Wednesday, and I was actually, I watched a lot of Wednesday's episode, and I commented a couple times. And I in the past, we've been doing, people have commented in. Did you not see my comments on Wednesday?
I thought I was just incorporating them in there.
Okay, I just think I didn't. I was like, well, I know I'm sending them. I know YouTube says that we're doing it.
Yeah. So I thought I put it on screen for a moment where it flashes across. Well, I would have been the only one that would have seen it, and anyone else that was watching the show. So Jason and RB wouldn't have seen it.
Yeah.
So I look at them and I try to work them in, or at least address as getting that conversation flow.
No, that was a good conversation you guys had on Wednesday.
Now the funny thing is that Grandpa, who was Ryan, is it McCombie or?
Yeah, Ryan McCombie.
Okay,
yeah.
So Grandpa was his roommate at Penn State.
Right, I remember when I met him that we were talking about that.
Right, so I was talking about stuff with my jaw, and so Grandpa says on the Facebook comments, "Hey, I'll break your jaw for free." Well, Facebook censored him.
Did they really? That's awesome.
I'm like, that's great. I was like, see, Jeff, you can't be violent on Facebook. They're monitoring everything.
10 more reasons why I don't have a Facebook account anymore.
But because he called me the next day, he's like, "Yeah, I got this email. I've now been censored.
You're on the list." You're
hey.
two episodes, you're 2 incidents away from being deplatformed.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, I was like, Jeff, you got to stop being so violent. I was
That's funny.
But we talked briefly a little bit about this aspect of, cocky, arrogance, confident, ego, and I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna just bring this as a solo topic, with us, because you probably have some experience with all of the above, especially being, maybe not from yourself, but witnessing, because at least the persona of being in the SEAL community, that they're all these brash people and just egomaniacs, at least from the public perspective, where they see them at bars, things like that. But I only know a few of you, and I haven't ever gotten that impression. But
I think for the most part, I mean, every group of people has jackasses, right, for life, but I think in large measure, right, and I'll speak of my generation, right, because the guys today, I mean, I think what the SEAL community has done well is every successive generation of frogmen has gotten smarter, stronger, bigger, better, faster, right? And I think within the brotherhood, you get checked a lot. Like you want to go get your arrogant ego on or like that. It's like people are gonna bring you back to reality in a hurry. And I think one of the ways that happens is what we call the AAR, the after action review. Like you go out and do anything, you come back, you sit around the table, everybody metaphorically takes their rank off. And I had a boss one time said to me, he goes, "Hey, we all have an equal opportunity to get hurt and die out there today. whether it's training or whatever. So we're all going to have equal opportunity to have input as to how we're going to conduct the day. At the end of it, even the boss was like, hey, hey, that wasn't the best decision you could have made. Like, that wasn't your best effort. And that's a big thing, is like, that wasn't your best effort, right? Because nobody's perfect, but we exert effort, right? And it's like, I see with my daughter playing basketball. I don't coach basketball. I don't know that much about basketball. I love watching her play, and it's her dream to play in college and everything like that. But I can coach effort, right? I know what effort looks like, and that's important, right? I think there's two things in life that are important: effort and execution. And when you start either, I think it's probably look at me. It's probably like that, because then it's ego, arrogance. It's hey, look at me. I'm more important than the whole. Is when bad things happen, right? And hey, every group. I mean, I'm not going to say a couple of these dudes' names. If my friends are watching, they'd laugh if I said their names, because they know. But like, it would be like, metaphorically, like, Bob loves him some Bob. All right, and everybody has a healthy sense of where they fit in the organization and how they contribute, right? And I say this all the time. Like, I didn't once in 20 years want to get a compliment from any of my peers. All you strive to do, and it's a good day if you don't embarrass yourself around it. All right. Whereas now everybody's striving, and that's why it works, right? Like, when you see Simon Sinek on there talking about having been with the command and spending time with SEALs, is what you walk away with is like, hey, your job is to look left and look right and never let any of those people down. If you're doing that and you're focused on that, then all of the external bad behaviors that an adult that is doing something that very few people in life have ever done mute themselves. Once you get away from that, and like you said, I don't think, like, when you see team guys out at bars, they're being arrogant. They're basically going, hey, we do some shit that people don't like. We work hard all day. We're going to play hard today, right? And play hard this evening, right? And that's, and some people go, oh, they're brash, they're loud. No, just blowing off steam. Like, where are you going to do it, right? I mean, that's, I think the community today is probably different in that respect. And I'm not saying, actually, I'm saying it's better today than it was when I showed up. Because if you weren't a good drinking buddy and you weren't going out with everybody and hanging out, you could be the best operator of the planet and nobody really cared, right? Because the community was that small, right? Well, now it's a big business, right? The business of it's a business of being a SEAL. It's the enterprise of being a SEAL. And, there was no light being shined on the community in the 80s like there is today. And I mean, it's 24/7, right? I think it's hard to be a team guy today, external to being inside the building doing your job, right? Because people are going to correct you. And I think that's the one great thing about the whole SEAL pipeline training process and how you work through your career is, anytime you want to get, metaphorically too big for your britches, there's going to be somebody to resize them for you. And they're going to be like, not enough, dude. Like, and some days it's painful. And I mean that in the best way possible, right? Where you've got to be embarrassed in front of all your friends and everything like that, because you were not head, right? A mutual friend of ours that was the CEO of a company that we both know and love. I mean, that was his big problem, right? That's one of the reasons he got out when he got out, because he saw the writing on the wall. But it was like, hey, you can't behave that way. You can't show up and go, hey, I'm the best. Well, somebody else is always better than you at something. Right. And your job is to work as hard as you can to be the best you can. And then let other people go, hey, Joe's the best guy at this. Let's let him go do that. Joe doesn't have to tell everybody he's the best. We all know it. More importantly, internally, Joe knows he's the best. He's just waiting around for somebody to go, hey, go fix that. Go do that thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people get confused the difference between, because really, to me, like, cocky and arrogant are pretty much the same, but you hear people say it in a different way. But a lot of people confuse, being confident with that aspect of arrogance and,
Right.
and cockiness. And I think that maybe some of the reasons why they do is because they have more self-doubt in themselves, and they just can't believe this person, would how can you say you're going to get that done? Like,
Yeah.
because it's in themselves. And so they're trying to, project that onto others.
Right.
And I am often accused of that. I'm like, hey, look, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go do it. And you're not going to be able to stop it. Like, this is what's going to happen. I know it's going to happen.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I'll say this. You're different today in that aspect than you were 7 years ago when we first met. Right. And knowing you as I know you now, a lot of like, that kind of like what I would say, I wouldn't say it was more bravado, was more, you were heavily invested in the imposter syndrome back then.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right. Which is now you're not. You're like, hey, I'm a made guy. I got the thing. I know where I'm going. I know what I want to do. Right. You know what the difference between confidence and ego is? Injury.
Yeah.
If you're driven by ego, you're going to get hurt. If you're driven by confidence, it means whatever skill, group you're leading, things you're asked to do, you understand how to do it, and you have a healthy respect for the dangers that go along with what you're doing, and that includes like leadership every day of the week stuff. And what are the downsides of what I'm doing and the tasks I've assumed, and you're always looking to be better. Ego says, I got this, right? There's two mirrors in life. And if any of the guys that put the training are watching, they're gonna laugh, because that you have two mirrors in life. There's one mirror that's, this is how cool I am, and there's another mirror that's, this is how cool I think I am. And if you don't overlay these with a little bit of humility, and you start having to look at both of them, when you're going back and forth trying to look in both of those mirrors, that's when you get hurt.
Yeah, sure. And this is that part, which I really resonates. I'm so confident in what's going to happen because I spend an enormous amount of time thinking about what could happen. So I'm extremely well prepared for many of the possibilities that could occur. And I feel like I'm a reasonably intelligent person, so I've thought of a lot of possibilities. And even if there's a possibility that actually occurred, the reality occurs, it's probably similar at least to something I've thought about, so I can quickly pivot. Because I just prepare, and then I want to get all of that preparation done as soon as I can, so then I can start testing some of those theories or rest for when that day happens. I have the energy to deal with any of the mayhem that's going to occur.
Right. Well, Bezos says, like, look, my job is to make about 2 or 3 good decisions a day. He goes, we hire professionals. I mean, remember years ago, we brought that guy in that was the UI UX guy from Amazon for the Kindle Fire and the Fire Phone, and we were trying to hire him. I mean, we couldn't afford to get him even if we wanted him. And I mean, because he was a genius. And back in the day, and I said to him, I go, hey, how's it to work with Bezos? Have you ever met him? He goes, oh yeah, all the time. He goes, trust me. He goes, if you're on the fire team, you get to see him all the time, right? Because at the time, it was the next delivery of goods and services was through that device, right? And for all the folks out there in TV land, the Amazon Fire Phone was the best phone no one ever bought. And a lot of it was the UI UX. And they had, like, now you have kind of the 3D modeling and maps in Google Maps and everything. Well, that all came from, Bezos wanting to implement that into his phone. Well, they were struggling with that. And he walked in one day and was like, to the team, how's it going? They're like, oh, we don't think we can do it. And they had all these reasons, technical reasons why they couldn't. And he said, no, you can. He goes, why? He goes, because you're really, really smart. And it's why we've hired you guys, because it's the power of, multiple brains doing the same thing makes all of you exponentially better. Turned around and walked out. Well, 3 days later, they cracked the code. They were suffering from doubt, right? And doubt is a big thing that brings ego into it, because people try to cover up doubt with their ego, and ego's the enemy. They were suffering from doubt, and he walked in and said, hey, it's okay not to know everything. You just got to keep working towards knowing everything. And I believe in you, right? And I think, when folks some folks, when they don't feel like, they're not feeling the love, air quotes type of thing, they run to arrogance and ego because they're like, wait a second, I want people to notice me, right? And I want things like, hey, let your life stand on its own, and be, be the person that you need to be for other people, right? Because if you're doing that, you don't have time to worry about yourself. Right? You're like, hey, I'm doing what I'm doing. I know where I'm at in life, right? I mean, because when you end up taking jobs, especially in senior leadership, and you get them, and you're in the middle of it, it's like, hey, I'm a made guy, right? I don't have to tell anybody I'm in charge. I don't have to. It's like, hey, we're out there, we're working together. But at the end of it, if there's something wrong, everybody's going to shut up and they're going to look at you. You either want that or you don't. And if you think you want it and then you get it and you don't, that's when it becomes problematic. And you get, I would say, the whole, like the Stanford study where, everybody's surprised, that a lot of the companies in America are run by these raging narcissists. Well, a board will hire somebody, they walk in and say, hey, I've saved this, I've done that, I'm going to do it again. And it becomes a self-actualization of arrogance. And it's like you hire a CEO at any sizable company, and you go get one of the major headhunters in a thing, you're talking 2.5, 3 times their annual salary as a fee for the first year. So if you make a mistake, what's that cost to the organization, right? Yeah. So then bad leaders, bad people, arrogant egomaniacs get to stay there for 2 or 3 years because they're trying to cost norm, because nobody wants to look silly, right? And I think ego and arrogance only come in when everybody's afraid to go, hey, that was me, and right, I did that, I screwed that up. And I'm bigger on celebrating those types of things because they're learning experiences, right? And especially you have a lot of younger people, 25, 35 years old, it's their first time being a director, their first time being a VP. Well, how are they going to learn? Like you can't expect perfect. And usually what happens is the person with the largest ego is the one that's tripping over themselves the most, because they're so focused inward that they're not worried about making the organization better, making their people better, and everything else that goes along with that. Because they have satisfaction in self, not satisfaction in result.
Yeah, I had a previous coworker and now friend over for dinner, and basically, we play cards, just kind of hang out, and we were talking about some of the things because the most important thing I learned from you at our time at the bank was you were the only person who ever stressed that as a manager you need to spend more time thinking about everything and then just being seen. And I remember the conversation because we're all in your conference room, and someone asked, like, how is it that you already have these ideas? You seem like you're 4 or 5 steps ahead of all of us. Why? And I said, well, the answer is pretty simple. How much time per day do you spend just thinking?
Right.
And most of you came back and were like, yeah, not a lot, because I'm having to do this, do that, do this. And I said, well, someone said, hey, I do it for like 15, 20 minutes. And I'm like, on average, I probably spend 2 to 3 hours a day thinking, about all of the different things that are happening. It's spread out throughout the day, but yeah. I had different carved out sessions of 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, and I just think, and there's an art to it. And so, yeah. Stephen, he remembers all these aspects, and he goes, yeah, and now he's like, part of it is also that ego aspect, because I said, well, why do you think you didn't want to? Because we didn't want to be seen as not doing something. I said, right, that goes back to your ego, and that you felt it's more important for what others perceive rather than the results you're going to deliver.
Right.
And so the ego can work in reverse. You may choose not to do something for the same reason for the people who are overly brash with their ego.
Right.
And that balance of, hey, I need to do what is right, and I need to be prepared. You can't be prepared if you don't spend time thinking.
Right. But Jim Valvano was a former coach of North Carolina State. He died of cancer, the Jimmy V Foundation, and all that stuff.
Mhm.
He gave a great speech. I don't know, shortly before he passed away. This is back, I think, in '93. He says you need to do three things in life daily. You need to be lost in thought, you need to laugh, and you need to cry. Right? You need to have your emotions. You need to show your emotions, and you need to be lost in thought. And it's like that's a pretty good day, right? And I think people that don't do that, they suffer, right? And I mean, they suffer intrinsically, internally, because they're not contemplative, right? They're not contemplative about work. They're not contemplative about themselves, right? And if you can't, Jordan Peterson says, if you want to know about yourself, go sit on the edge of your bed and talk to yourself about something you know you're not doing right. And then make yourself.
That would be very challenging for me because that's all I do.
No, but most people don't, though, right? Right? Most people don't. Like they put the things they're bad at in a corner, right? And they're like, "Hey, that's over there. I'm just going to ignore it."
You think bad or what they're not doing correct?
Well, right, but you know what I mean. The things in their life that are adverse, right? You go say, "Hey, here's something that I'm not doing. You know, it's not good. It's either, hey, this is just really wrong what I'm doing, or I'm not good at it," and everything like that. And most people focus on their strengths. And I think people that are really successful have to focus on their weaknesses.
Well, I think you have to understand your weaknesses so you know who you need to put around
you, right? I totally agree with that. And we talked about that a lot, right? I also think it's like people take shortcuts, right, in life. They take shortcuts that ultimately are things. So, hey, my life's not going great. I need money. I need this and that. And they'll take. You guys were talking about it on Wednesday night. Have you ever taken a job just for money? You can, but it's not going to work out well.
I did once, and I think a lot of people who are very interested in being better, they make that mistake once. They think that money's going to be there. Then they go, oh, wait a minute. Money is just one form of compensation. I need all these other pieces as well. I mean, hey, look, I'm not working for free anywhere, but and when you're talking about some of those pieces, one of the things that resonated with me that there's two things that I do. Like it's very common to say, hey, how you doing? And a lot of people, even more common, will say, I'm fine or I'm good. And I like to say to them, well, what's it going to take for that to be great?
Yep, I do the same thing.
And I catch myself sometimes when I go, hey, wait a minute. Why am I just saying fine? Like, what's it going to take for me to be great again today? Like, I'm missing something. So I do that quite often, which catches that. And then a big thing, which is why a lot of times I don't really feel stress, because I think people feel stress because they failed to think long enough about particular things that could happen. Therefore, they're not well planned on how to execute. And so then that's when stress comes up. You're stressed out because you did not foresee this, or like what you like to say about the space shuttle, you didn't imagine that this could have happened. And now you've internalized that. For me, I mean, and when I check that, like, my checking myself at the end of the bed, per se, and with the Jordan's example, happens to be what didn't I plan for properly yesterday?
Right.
And there's quite a bit. Like, I'll give you a great example. I have this thing here I'm working on in the distillery, and there's been tons of things that, I mean, I've never done any of this. I've played around with some stuff in the backyard. I've made beer. Now I'm doing this stuff at a little bit more in scale. I've got some professional equipment, and there's some things I need to do. Like, one of them is, hey, you've got to remove some of the off-putting things that alcohol just presents. And so you've got to build this tube, and you've got to fill it with not activated charcoal, but carbon coal, and you've got to wash it first. But the reason for that is it's going to take off any of the other impurities, and it's like, especially for vodka, it's going to turn it clear. Right?
Right.
You want to get rid of, because vodka has to be colorless, odorless, tasteless. Right?
Nobody likes cloudy vodka.
Right. Well, how am I going to do that? Right?
Right.
I've got. All right. I've got to figure this out. And there's some things I'm like, well, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. All right, but it's like, oh, I didn't think that was going to happen. Or the time when I got a vodka shower, which was a couple of weeks ago, because one of the columns wasn't quite sealed properly. I'm like, all right, well, it didn't matter. In the moment, I get really irritated, but it's like, okay, add this to the checklist.
Right.
I'm not going to make that mistake again.
But here's the thing: aside from wanting to make liquor and sell it and build a business, I think a good, from all we talk from all the times we talk and we talk about, I'm like, hey, how's the distillery going? Like everything that you say is about a learning experience.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I think, when people that are entrepreneurs, people that end up doing great things, they revel in the process. Right? People that have ego want the results so they can be out in town, look at me. Right? And it goes back to the old thing we've talked about before about our previous time together. It was some folks just want the win. Right? And if it looks like they're not going to win, they're going to give up and they're going to move to something that can give them the win.
Yeah.
All right. Well, wait a second. I can't have an F on my report card. Right? Well, do your homework. Don't do the classwork. Don't show up late for class. Turn in your assignments on time and you won't get an F. Right? But you're going to have to exert some effort. And if again, it comes back to thinking. If you show up to do something in your thought process and you're like, hey, what I've contemplated is this is going to be easy. When it's not so easy, because most things that give great reward require great effort. When it's not easy and you've not prepared for that, you've not set your mental and your emotional framework up to make it easy, to make it easier on yourself. That's when you're going to be pissed off. That's when you're going to this is bullshit, blah, you're going to lose your head, and then you're going to quit.
Yeah.
And what you're doing, you're like, hey, to me, listening to you talk, and it's a great thing about when you talk about distillery, it's this mix of, hey, I'm relatively educated on it because I've gone to courses, I've spent time acquiring knowledge, right? And this childlike wonderment of discovery about things that this isn't in the book, right? Because they say, and I'm sure it is, put slot A and flat B, set it up, and it just works. Well, what happens when it doesn't work? All right, I bet you there's somebody out there that you've crossed your path that they've experienced the same thing, and hopefully. What I know you'll do is when somebody comes to you 2 or 3 years from now and says, hey, I want to build a distillery, you're going to try to shortcut them into chapter 3. And he goes, 1 and 2 is really scary. Don't do this. Start your book right here.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the egoist thing to do is give to others and say, hey, here's all here's how many times I fell off the truck and got bruised up on the way. I don't want you to do that. Wear a seatbelt. And here's how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is the thing I would, all the advice I get, and probably very similar from what you're doing with the company you're at now. Like when the missus and I were talking about doing this, I said, look, the first thing we need to decide, do we want to be General Motors or do we want to be BMW? And she goes, well, what do you mean? I said, we can either make for the masses and not necessarily be known for the best quality, or we're only going to be top shelf. Which is it that you want to be? Because they both make a lot of money.
Right.
I said,
but they do it in 2 separate ways.
Right. I said, or do you want to be Walmart or Microsoft? They both make the same amount of net income, but
right.
One of them makes a tremendous more about the revenue. So
right.
If we want to be transactional, then that means you can't have quality because you can't scale that quality cheaply.
Right.
But we can do it small. BMW is small. When you start talking about how many number of cars
vehicles that roll off the line, no doubt.
Yeah, right. I said so, but they focus on quality. Mercedes focuses on quality. so which do you want to be? And I think everyone, when they're starting a business, you have to make that determination up front. When you do that, then it makes it really easy to make future decisions.
No, I totally agree with that. I think now, in the auto industry, think about what you're seeing now is, in the 40s, most states made some law to say that you have to buy an automobile from a dealership. And back in the 40s, it was largely to protect the dealers from the manufacturers. That the manufacturers, if you went direct to GM to buy your Chevy truck, rather than going to a Chevy dealership, they could undercut the price. And so the laws were made to protect from that. Well, right now, it's illegal to buy a direct, like a Tesla or Rivian truck, all these new EVs that are coming out. It's illegal, like, to buy a truck. Like, funny is, so New York, the state of New York, has invested so much money in like EV stuff, like charging stations and stuff like that. They'll pay like $5,000 for a business to put a charging station in a parking lot and things like that, right? In contrast, Florida hasn't done that. But people are buying EVs in Florida at a much higher rate than New York, because New York allowed Tesla to have like 4 stores, like direct, like 4 showrooms, and then they cut them off. So, but all those showrooms are where? They're all like in New York City, maybe one about, but they're not like, that's where the state of Florida is like, yeah, just go online, buy it, do whatever you need to do, right? Texas, you can't, like, there's a swath down the middle of the country where, for the most part, they're never going to allow this direct model, and it's going to change, because it has to change. Because people, like, I mean, you look at Carvana. Is Carvana a dealership? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're structured as such because they're, but now it's like, hey, what's important to the customer, and how is technology going to facilitate that? Right? Even my Volvo right now, like, I'll get a message from them like, hey, hook your car up to Wi-Fi. We have a software update. And so I park it in the thing, hook it up at night before I think, when I come out, there's a new software update. Or if I want, I can go to one of their high-speed things that they have at the dealership and park my car there and let it eat, and then pick it up. Do I really need a dealer to buy an automobile today? Not even close, right? But I think in everything in life is Moore's law across citizenship and across life changes. We've collapsed all this, and then now you're seeing, do I need to go? I think I would say, like, in the 60s and 70s in particular, a lot of people would go buy from a dealership because they knew somebody at that dealership, or the dealer had a great reputation. They weren't necessarily buying the car because they couldn't live without that car. They're like getting it from a place where they trusted somebody. Well, yeah. Do you trust Elon Musk? Do you trust the Rivian guys? By the way, I
definitely don't trust Elon Musk.
I was looking at that Rivian truck the other day. That's a badass automobile.
Yeah, it looks pretty slick. I mean, this is a big thing. Like, we talked about this on one of the prediction shows, a few years ago. I'm like, look, Tesla is the pilot market. The big car manufacturers are going to come in and eat his lunch. Yeah. It's only a matter of time. They're just going to wait to see if does the market really care. I say, and this is a big thing and I don't know if it's true still today, but I'm like, look, Ford Motor Company has more cash on hand than the amount of revenue that Tesla's made in the entire history of its company. Now, this was true a couple of years ago. It might still be true. I don't know. I'm going, if they want, they can just go and buy it. Like, they can buy the technology.
Yeah.
They can start R&Ding it right now, but they're just going to wait and see, do people want it? And if they do, bam. And then here we go. What's the company? And I did actually say this as well. I said, it won't surprise me if Hyundai is the one that eats their lunch first. And they did. Tell you what, I'm with that Kia. With that Kia EV, it broke all the records.
I am so impressed with Hyundai. I mean, you think about it. 10 years ago, people bought Hyundais because they couldn't afford a Toyota.
Yeah.
Now people are hunting, like if you look at, especially like the Genesis line, because they broke it off from the thing. And those are some unbelievably well appointed and automobiles that have, and they put their money where their mouth is in their warranties and everything like that.
They've
I
done it.
brought,
I think they've done a great job. So like Genesis is their luxury brand.
yep,
Kia is for like the millennials, Gen X's, and Hyundai is for families. I mean, that's kind of like their motto. All
yeah.
right, if you're a family person, then you want to buy a Hyundai. That's
But
the way they want.
they've got it. Honda was one of those cars, like, remember when GM did the Geos?
Yeah, yeah. I had
Like,
one. I had a Geo Storm. That was my first car
no,
that I bought,
nice.
and it was purple.
Of course it was. What'd you get, like $3 when you traded it in?
I don't remember,
No,
but
you know what I mean. They were like, you had it, and it was a disposable automobile because there was no worth left in the car once you drove it off the lot, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
whereas now when Dora was got a license and we're looking around for a car, and I was looking at a couple of the Toyotas, and I was like, man, this is like, in the $20,000 to $25,000 price range. I wasn't getting that much, and I kind of like, let me go look at the Hondas, and went and looked at the Hyundai Konas. It's their little small, like the subcompact SUV, and for 23 grand, all-wheel drive, leather seats, the Apple car, all the bells and whistles with the sunroof, the whole 9 yards, and it was under 25 grand, and 100,000 mile warranty, everything like that. I mean, it's a great, it's one of those things that's like, she'll have it all the way through college and everything like that, and then she can make an adult decision about what she wants to buy when she's out working and doing those things, right? But I wouldn't have considered that. Like when Jared got his, like I would have never considered that. I was like, where I wasn't even looking at that. Right? It didn't pop up on the radar. And what's it going to be 6 years from now? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what's going to be the hot thing 6 years from now? I don't know, but I bet you it's going to have a big ass battery in it.
Unfortunately, it will have a big ass battery in it, right? Because
Yeah,
I think gets back to we're still using the oil,
I
right? It
know.
just happens to be coming. It's just not
Okay.
coming directly to the car.
All right. So let's tie this back into ego, right? And hubris and arrogance,
Yeah.
right? A lot of times with ego and arrogance and everything like that, if I can't see the problem, it's not a problem, right? So
Syndrome.
if you look at you kind of globally, right? The U.S. and since 2016 has done more to remove carbon footprint from society than any other nation on Earth. Period. Full stop. We're never going to build another coal-fired power plant in the U.S. ever. But guess what? China's building 1,500 this year. India's on the same glide slope. And then there's this little inconvenient thing called the jet stream. So when we say, hey, where are we going? We're doing more to be green. And it's how much do you want to tilt that to, how fast do you want to go down that slope? The faster you go, the more you take the opportunity cost to trash the economy exists, right? When you get the arrogance and hubris of the, what used to be the Prius crowd, which is now the EV crowd, they're like, well, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Well, where do you think, when you plug your car in at night, what do you think happens on the other end of that?
You got these little gnomes that are running on a wheel.
Exactly. But that's when you get ego and arrogance into it, you're like, well, I'm doing this, I'm saving the planet. Well, you're just not seeing where the destruction's coming from.
I think it's doing more harm.
A great friend of mine, the guy's name is Patrick Anderson. He owns Anderson Economic Group in Lansing, and he has done probably more economic analysis on the auto industry in the last 25 years than most other humans. And he has ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, and he has EV. He's got a Porsche Taycan, the new Porsche Taycan EV, and which is a badass car, right? One of the guys that at the parent company that we work for, he has a car, and it's an unbelievable car. And he's done all this, like all this analysis on like the cost of ownership, and the cost of ownership of an EV is still relatively high compared to an ICE vehicle. And I think if you crack the 700-mile mark, that's when it becomes a mass marketable thing. Because most people, when they're on a road trip, they're going to drive 500-600 miles in a day, and nobody wants to run on empty on anything, whether it's electrons or gas, right? Nobody wants to run on empty. And so you crack the 700-mile mark in a day. Just think about it. When I was driving back and forth to DC when we worked together, it's 360, 370 miles round trip. And there were no charging stations. I guarantee you, in the basement of the condo now, I guarantee you they've got charging stations in that parking garage. Right? Just because it's 8 years later, and they have to, right? The parking garage here, they got a whole row where you've got things. The thing that I'm like, I contemplate when I pull in at night in my big gas guzzling company F-150 is are those folks paying extra for the privilege of having that, or is that a courtesy thing or a thing? Like in the Mid-Atlantic, Wawa is huge, like it's a convenience store, and they have a great deli counter, right? And I was coming back from a basketball tournament, pulled into a Wawa, and they have like 10 or 12 charging stations and picnic tables. People charge their car, and from what I understand now, and not owning a Tesla, I either it's experiential from other people or what I read, that they have adaptive charging now. So like in the first 30 minutes, it really, you can get a lot out of it, and then it norms it across time. The longer you keep it in, it's like, okay, we're not going anywhere. We can all calm down, and it'll more evenly charge. And people are out there though, like, hey, I'll sit there for 30 minutes. I'll have a sandwich. I'll do my thing. I'll get half of whatever, and it'll increase my time by 50%, and they roll on. Genius marketing idea.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely genius marketing idea. Right. And one of the things now that I know from a Tesla, because my predecessor here has a Tesla, and the first thing he did, like we were driving around one day, and he's like hit something, and it's like every charging station in the area is highlighted. And he's like, this thing changes daily, so people are very reactive to that. And do I think over time that we're, I think by 2025, Volvo is going to have no more internal combustion engine cars. Like if you go on the Volvo website today, you have to hunt to find the internal combustion only cars.
Yeah.
Right? They start with the fully rechargeable, then they start with the hybrid, and then 3 tabs over and down, and I've got to call somebody and ask for maintenance on the website, and then I can see the ICE vehicles, because this is the path they've chosen, right? And again, I think it's a net zero. It might, there might be something there, but I think it's a net zero. It's like where's the power coming from? It's either coming out of the ground, or it's coming from a plug, and there's still some usage and expenditure into the atmosphere of carbon, right? What I think though is, in the US in particular, just like everything else, as a nation, having the ability and having the will are two different things, right? In life, right? I have the ability to do things. Do I have the will to do it, right? And we're probably one of the few nations on earth that can be self-sufficient. We could put a wall up around the country and tell everybody to get out, stay in, and we can feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, power ourselves, and everything. We're the single largest holder of natural gas on the planet, right? But yet we want to stop since in the last year, we've said, hey, we're going to close down pipelines, we're going to do everything, and we're going to go back to the Middle East modern, where we're paying despots to hate us.
That's my favorite.
Right? What's that?
That's my favorite.
Yeah, but think about that. Like that's like, and it's like, hey, well, we're going to do this. Well, you can't turn the spigot off of anything and say you have to go to something else.
This is where I would think about. It's Walmart is going to pay Amazon to deliver for them.
Right.
Anyone else would go, that's crazy. Why would they ever do that? Well, that's what we're doing.
Right.
We're paying people that hate us to give us some more when
Yeah.
we've got it here. Like,
Right.
how we literally turn off that pipeline, they go away. They got nothing.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? If we say, hey, we're gonna invest heavily into doing it ourselves, that there's no recourse, right? You can't have the '70s oil crisis again. You know why? Because we're doing it here. We created a crisis.
Yeah.
Right. We created the shortage and all the other things, right? But that's the ego-driven thing. It's like, hey, if I can't see, I'm gonna green up my. I think what a lot of short-sighted people, politicians in particular, are if it doesn't happen here, it doesn't happen. I'm going to close my eyes to the fact that India they have the best argument ever. Like at the turn of the 20th century, the U.S. unknowingly, right, because we didn't know what we didn't know back then, belched everything into the atmosphere to become the greatest industrial might on the planet. Why don't we get our turn?
Well, because it's just like any good parent. Because I said so.
Well, but I got that. But everybody else is like, oh yeah, just and so there's I think
But nuclear is so much cheaper and more efficient. So why would they want to do coal?
I actually, with China in particular, I don't know why their fascination with coal plants. Right? You know what I mean? I don't think, but they do. And India the same way, right? But here's the thing:
Maybe it's because they don't have the discipline in order to do nuclear. It's safer, I mean, in a way, to run coal. I would imagine.
Well,
I don't know for sure, but I mean,
if you don't build a power plant on the San Andreas Fault, it's you know what I mean, like that kind of thing. It's like, and I think today with modern power plants and things like that, modern nuclear power plants, even the left, like, when they get forced into it, is are you agenda driven, meaning I want to do wind and I want to do solar, or do you want to power the world? Right. And think about, like, even in the Navy, like think about like the Enterprise, the first nuclear aircraft carrier had 8 small reactors. They soon figured out that was a menace, trying to maintain 8 small things. Well, let's make 2 big ones. Right. And that's been the model ever since. And the efficiencies, I think probably a little known thing is, like, where possible, anytime a nuclear aircraft carrier pulls in to overseas to go, let everybody off and go have fun, they plug into the power grid where they can. In a lot of places over the years, he's already drinking, isn't he?
Probably.
He's already. I want the Chinese power plants in China. I want American power plants in America. I want Indian power plants in India. Like, come on, dude, think. But they'll plug in and rather than paying like port fees and everything, they'll just plug into the grid, because it's not like you can turn the reactors off or anything like that. Shut the lights and let everybody go out and drink. And they'll just plug in, right? And what a great service.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I don't say, but it just comes right back again to ego as well, right?
Right.
You get these countries, either they're self-doubting that their ability to maintain these nuclear reactors,
Yeah,
or they just kind of want to go, well, we just want to stick our tongue out of the rest of the world and go like, yeah, we don't really care because we're just going to do this. Or maybe they've got a ton of coal and they just want to use it. I don't
exploit the resources. But here's the thing, like, I always laugh because, like, they're always like, everybody's like, oh, the left is trying to put the coal industry out of business. Most of the coal from West Virginia leaves out of Norfolk. And if you drive past the terminals, there's no shortage of big piles of black stuff sitting there getting loaded onto ships to go to some other country now.
Just think about all those diamonds that aren't going to get made.
Could you, like, can you imagine all of a sudden it would be like, it'd be like the Clampets, if all of a sudden they found like this big vein of diamonds in West Virginia, and all of a sudden it became the new South Africa.
Yeah. Oh. Then they would no longer. Then they would actually invent the teeth brush.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. And when you say tooth, you have to. It's spelled TOOFF. Toothbrush.
Yeah. Toothbrush.
If you were meant to have many, there it would be plural.
I think that's largely in part because people in that area are making too much bad corn liquor, and it's just rotting out all their teeth.
Tony, send us a picture with a big smile, please.
Well, my friend, I gotta get to making some of this good liquor. It's about that time I gotta start paying attention. So
I see with your copper bathtub in the background.
Yeah, well, we're not doing that. We're finishing up some rum, but it's
Cool.
getting to a point where I'm like, all right, I got to start paying attention to this, and the missus should be here any moment to start, determining whether or not we're out of the hearts or not. So
Nice, very cool.
So awesome.
It's
right.
Good that one of you has a discerning palate about that.
That would be her. I can tell you when we're into the tails, but that aspect of when it turns from heads to hearts, not necessarily. But
not so much.
Yeah, you can tell when it's really bad, which is
right,
the tails. Right. But other than that,
that's awesome, man.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Have a great rest of your week.
You as well.
See you next week.
You certainly will. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care, everyone.